grant with the New York State Archive, which is a division of the New York State Department of Education. The town received a grant this past year, and then somewhere in the neighborhood of $5,000, to convert the town minutes from various formats, some paper, some microfilm, some digital, to all digital. The second grant, which we hope to apply for by February 1st, would build on that. And in speaking with Hope and Bishop and Nick, the idea might be this time to actually purchase the piece of equipment to enable the town to do it rather than the current grant, which is to reach out and have a consultant come and help in the scanning of all the data. But for the purposes of the minutes, it's probably a really good approach, since there's a diverse kind of data. In the past 9 years, the town has received 2 grants from the state in this area of archiving. This past one of $5,000, and earlier one in 2006 for about $21,000. So we have some experience with this. And last year at this time, you authorized the similar resolution for the grant that was secured by the town.
Wonderful. Any questions, comments from the board? Did a motion to go for it, Hope? Go for it, Mr. Arcaro. To get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Gelfar.
Aye.
Mendocino.
Aye.
Myers.
Aye.
Villanova.
Yes.
Corbin.
Yes. Before we get, thank you, Mr. Arcaro. Before we get to the town reports, these RFPs, I wanted to, if we could just entertain a brief discussion. We're not going to vote on anything tonight, but I am looking for the board at least to think about instructing Mr. Nowotnik and his team to think about putting together RFPs. One of the things we talked about is an RFP for landscaping activities at Crawford Park. Now, Mr. Nowotnik, what happened with that? I know you've been terribly busy. We just haven't gotten around to it. Is there? Are you waiting for approval from the board? We just heard from the town attorney we don't need approval for the board to put together an RFP. So I guess
the month of January is an extremely busy month for me because we have a lot of payroll processing, benefit processing. All those changes typically happen.
So I'm just,
in
the
month of
question.
January.
So I think you've been terribly busy, but I just want to make sure that the town attorney and the board are clear that Mr. Nowotnik has the authority and is empowered to draft an RFP between now and next board meeting to effectively privatize the landscaping services at Crawford Park. Now, I just want to make clear to everybody in the audience at home, this doesn't mean we're going to do that. Talked with the staff. It doesn't mean we're going to do that, but we need to evaluate that opportunity to see where we end up with that kind of thing. So I wanted to take a couple minutes to discuss this with Mr. Nowotnik, the town attorney, and the board, just to make sure that we don't want Mr. Nowotnik, if the board has agreed that we should move forward. I know Councilwoman Mendocino, you had some ideas on this.
No, yeah, that's fine.
But I think that the strategy is to ask Mr. Nowotnik to prepare an RFP for this. Any comments, questions from the board? Mr. Noto.
No, that's fine.
Okay, so I want to do that. Now, there's a second RFP that I'd like for us to consider, and Mr. Nowotnik is not presenting the capital plan tonight, but the analysis that you've done with Lisa East and the architect basically concludes that we, in terms of the town infrastructure, need about $5 million more or less in capital expenditures over the next couple of years, if I remember correctly.
I think that's a five-year plan.
5-year plan. $1.8 million for this building, more or less.
Yep.
About $1.2 million in Crawford Park, right?
Yep.
And then there's another $2 million, $250,000. Oh, you have it right there. Okay.
Well, this is a summary.
And then another $250,000 in equipment. So, I think we should be considering selling this building in the form of a sale-leaseback. Again, looking to all the different alternatives, for the town to save taxpayers' money. So this is the 5 million exactly, right. So 116 is just for the people at home. We have about $1.1 million for the Crawford Park, $250,000. These are round numbers for the garage.
Yep.
1.8 for this building, and then another 1.5. Right, that's the big one for Jefferson Avenue Bridge, and then vehicles and equipment. All told up to $5 million. Now, on a budget of $3.5 million, that's a big number. And I think that we really need to be, and that doesn't incorporate anything for Rytown Park. And the numbers for Rytown Park are $14 million?
Yeah, they're on the second page.
Oh,
Just the grand total. Again,
Right, so 14.6 for Rytown Park. Now, of which our portion will be 8.7, the remainder will be for Rice City. Now, Rice City, our wealthy neighbors to the, what are they, to the north? Or what are they?
To the south.
To the south? Our wealthy neighbors to the south are crying poverty and say they have no money to invest. And little bitty Rytown wants to move forward now. I do think as we move into our last year in office, and as we've sort of got the operating budgets normalized, it's we can't sit here in good conscience and let the capital assets of the town simply deteriorate. I don't think there's any real significant capital expenditure made in the town of Rye for probably 50 years. Certainly that's the case down at Rytown Park in the pavilion. And we need to come up with a plan for making these capital expenditures. Now, in terms of a sale leaseback, the very rough math, and we'll come back next meeting. But the very rough math is if you, well, let's just throw out a number. If we have $5 million, we have $1.8 million to spend on this building. If you sold this building for argument's sake $2 million, correct my math if I'm wrong. I saved 1.8 opportunity cost and I get $2 million in proceeds. I just made $3.8 million, didn't I?
No,
Why not?
I don't know about that.
because someone still has to do the 1.8 million in repairs.
But they're going to
Who's
be
going to do that?
right. Okay, so
You're
that
selling it
right.
as is that what
So
you're saying?
so basically, yes, exactly. Sorry.
What about rent?
So
And
the
you get
rent
for 20 years.
the rent is going to be. Was I figured the proposal to the eventual buyer would look something like this. You'd basically say, sorry, you're absolutely right. You'd say you give us proceeds free and clear. You'd invest in the building, and you would charge us a rent, right? So you'd say and I think they would bid on three separate categories. So one is, what are the proceeds free and clear that would come to the town, right? Because somebody's got to invest that $1.8 million.
Right.
How much money would you invest in the town, right? In this building,
And the building itself.
the building itself, and then what rent would you charge us, for the next say 20 years?
Right.
Now, I'm anxious to put this out to bid, right, to see what we get. And so what I would like to do is instruct Mr. Nowotnik to come up with an RFP for our next meeting, for our review at the next meeting.
The only thing that you might foresee you might have a problem with is getting someone to give us a rental price for 20 years, because they might want to, it might come out that the building is not repairable within their means, and they might want to knock it down. So
That's a good-
definitely, we might not want to
Maybe we
put
should do a
20 years in there.
fiscal analysis first before we do an RFP.
What does that mean?
Well, have it, and the controller of the town.
No. We waited since last time, and I haven't gotten it. I'm sorry.
Well, just to get a sense of what.
Well,
the
fiscal
numbers are.
analysis. What kind of fiscal
I think they
analysis?
should-
Well, like you said, someone has to invest the money to make the repairs. How much rent? How many square feet do we need? What's the price per square foot? Or do we? Because the other option is we go somewhere else to another building, and then they tear this down.
Right.
But either way, the town's going to pay rent because you still have to provide X number of square feet. So is 2 million, do we need an appraisal to say if that's even a legitimate number for this building? We should probably figure out, ask a broker, what this
No,
building
so
really
what I am prepared to do, Mr. Noto, is have that fiscal analysis, right, can accompany the RFP. But I don't see, if we're putting out an RFP for the privatization of Crawford Park, which effectively we may or may not do, I don't see why we couldn't put out an RFP. We don't have any idea, what bids are going to come in. If the bids are too low, what?
It's a proposal, not a bid, so it's not like a...
Well, to put on an RFP.
It's a request for proposals, meaning someone will make a proposal to us saying, we can do this, or that you could, if you...
And I think, but you
can work on that deal and make
Right.
it better, but I think, well, it's up to
And the RFP has to
board,
be-
you guys
Well,
will-
just like the other gentleman that gave us the presentation on the bridge, he said
Yeah.
when the RFPs go
Yeah.
out, it will actually tweak questions and make him, the proposal better. So I think that
Maybe in this
that's the
case,
starting point.
maybe in this case, Mr. Supervisor, there is some merit to just getting an appraisal of the building. What do we need? Just see what it's worth.
Let me make it easier for everybody. There's a very clear strategic investor here. Okay, the nearest, not a secret to anybody, nearest bakery is across the street, and working in this kind of transactions every day, the strategic investor is prepared to pay more than a non-strategic investor. I can tell you the value of the building, if you get it appraised, it's not going to be worth a penny. In other words, it's not going to be worth a penny. It's not going to be worthwhile to do it. So I want to begin to initiate this process so we can begin to look at some numbers relatively seriously. Now, if I was a private entity, I'd go across the street and start to negotiate something. But we all know we can't do that. We've got to put it out for public bid. There's got to be a public auction. So since I can't, if I were a private entity, I'd go straight across the street and do it. Since I can't do that, we're having a very transparent, open conversation in front of the whole community, and basically saying, look, let's get this process. It's a question of putting together an RFP, discussing it at the next meeting, the RFP at the next meeting. What I don't want to do is lose another month. Because I think what we can't do is we've put off this capital plan for a year. Right? We haven't really made any significant provision for our capital plan, so I don't want to put off the capital plan any further. And I think that while my fast mathematics were incorrect, I do think that if we get a proposal in front of us, we may be able to work with somebody that makes sense. If we can get this building renovated, for free to the public, I think that there's some advantage to that. And if we can generate some proceeds as well, even better. Now, if we have no use of the money, then it's a different matter.
Well, you got to see what he's willing to charge in rent.
It's all.
It's all.
Comprehensive
Just
proposal.
starting the process.
You got to see if you're saving money or not. Just because you get money up front doesn't mean you're going to save in the long run.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
So.
It's I just don't see how a town with a $3.5 million budget can borrow $20 million in this environment. I think we have to at least consider solutions outside the box. And you only see, we'll say, look, if we get no interest, then there's no interest. It's an easy decision. And if we get significant interest, then it will work out nicely. It ultimately depends on, what happens. But the only thing I'd like to do is to authorize Mr. Watnick to put together an RFP.
Well, you saying an RFP to do what? For us to pack up and go, or an RFP to do what? Well, what is it the RFP to do?
Effectively, sell the building, right? And I think you're right. Again, we need to come to the board with some flexible ideas. But the way I'm imagining it is the bidder would say, okay, I'm going to need X number of dollars to refurbish the building. Well, one of the things we were talking about, Mr. Watnick and I, is a private builder can probably renovate this building for half the 1.8 we're talking about. That's true. Unfortunately. And so you're going to get the same result for half the money. That's one thing. So
actually, I would only question Mr. Noto. For example, stuff like Davis-Bacon and things like that. Would they really be a savings versus public versus private owner?
Well, the savings would be on the Wicks law because if a private developer buys the building, then it's not a municipal project, and then you're not subject to the Wicks law.
Which, just for everybody at home, is
That's a law that every contract over 50,000, you have to break it up into separate contracts for each profession. It adds,
Actually, a lot of.
30% to every project. And that's school districts and any municipal project. So on that basis alone, you'd say there would be a savings were there a private developer doing it. But the issue becomes the town has to provide services, the town has to have I don't know what the square, 20,000 square, what do we need?
Well, this building is 12,000 square feet plus or minus.
But we rent some of it, don't we?
And we use probably about close to 10,000.
Right, so let's say 10,000 square feet. You have the courtrooms, you got to have offices, and you have to have a town clerk, you have to have a receiver. So you'd have to ask them what they would charge per square foot for that space.
So it's really like a threefold thing. A, what are you willing to pay for the building? B,
Right.
what are you willing to do for repairs? And C, what do you foresee charging?
exactly.
Now, if C comes back, I'm not going to lease it to you, I'm going to do something else with it, then we have to decide where do we go, and how much is it going to cost us, it doesn't make sense to do.
Yeah.
But we have to start somewhere.
Right.
All right, so ask the question. So ask the question. No
Yeah,
comment.
that's exactly.
I mean, you can circulate an RFP to realtors, developers, brokers, see what what's out there. I mean, there could be people that want to come in and buy the building and just make it into an office building. I mean, I wouldn't assume one guy is going to buy it because there might be other interested parties.
Exactly.
It's a great location. It's right near, it's right. So
No, that's fine.
if someone wants to come in and renovate it,
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
On the other hand, we're going to have to pay rent, and that's
The town will
right now-
have-
Well, I'm thinking that what we're going to end up is at the Rye-Town Pavilion and the nice new office overlooking Long Island Sound, but that's for another meeting.
which is, by the way, a possibility, with the
That's not
exception of the
gonna
parking issue. There could be, in which case we'll never dissolve the town of Rye because the office of the supervisor will be overlooking the sound. An attorney will
Yeah,
have a
I'm
nice
changing my
office
vote on that
over
one,
by
Billy.
the sound.
If I get to with the.
The town clerk will have a beautiful view.
Good. All right, terrific. So, Mr. Nowotnik, you have your marching orders for night, right? The night. Good, fantastic. And
Well,
I'm
my own Well, and Mr.
Actually, sorry, just last thing. Could you, we've talked about this capital plan. I guess until we know where we are with the RFPs, we won't be able to come up with a cap plan. So that's a couple months off, I guess, right? Yeah, good.
Have we, Mr. Supervisor, when we put out for the RFP, obviously asking someone what they'd be willing to pay for the building is a fairly concrete question. Are we giving them any kind of expectations or specifications as to what extent of repairs we have in mind? Or we just
We'll certainly
gonna
share
say-
with them the analysis been done by our architect.
Okay.
And, again, I think that's what we need to determine over the next month. In fact, maybe if you had some time to help Mr. Nowotnik pull together the RFP, but you're right, we could do it one of two ways. You could say, what reparation or repairs do you recommend? Or we could establish very clearly, these are the minimum, so I think there's probably two ways to go on that.
I would attach our architect's report to the RFP and saying it would be our expectation that most of these have to be done. If we're going to remain here, they have to, if we're going to stay, and attach it right to the RFP, so it's right there. They can see exactly what.
Right.
we have in mind, which
Yeah.
is going to, obviously.
They can't come in and say, you didn't tell me
Right.
you wanted me to fix the elevator,
Right.
which is what you run into. With
But obviously, that's going to lower what we get, presumably.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
So,
Great. Okay, town reports. Mr. Marquis, you've given us a report. Thank you. Mr. Burns?
This is for Mr. Burns.
Mr. Burns.
Modifications.
What you have in front of you is it's just some housekeeping, the annual housekeeping for the 2010 budget modifications. We are just adjusting line items for increases and decreases. We are not increasing the overall 2010 budget. Two of the major items that increased in 2010, where line items had to be adjusted, were the Pearl Street for the infrastructure that was done for wiring and the servers that were done in the second floor. The other major increase was for Crawford Park for the storm that occurred in March. There was major tree damage, and there was major cost for that. So we did have to use our contingency that was put in place for 2010 to offset that. But overall, there was additional line items, were pluses and minuses. There were no increases to the operating budget for 2010. So this is housekeeping that happens every year. So we're asking you to do standard operating procedure is vote on this as a resolution for these changes.